All right, guys, so the first thing we're going to do is a little bit of review of what we talked about yesterday. We said in 1660, a guy named Robert Hooke is the first guy that we know of who actually saw cells and sort of named them. He was looking at cork. So probably what he was looking at was dead. He was seeing the outlines of what?
Plant cells.
What parts of plant cells? The walls. Okay? The inside parts of the cells were gone. They were decayed, gone. He was just seeing walls. But they looked like little rooms to him, so he named them cells. A little while later, a guy named Antoine van Leeuwenhoek came along. And remember, he was a little kooky, but he was really good at making what?
Lenses.
He was really good at making lenses. So he kind of became famous to other scientists because he made really good lenses, really good magnifying glasses. And apparently he's the first guy who decided that he ought to look at what with them? Pine water. He just took some pine water and looked at it with one of his lenses he had made. And he saw little one-celled organisms in there that nobody had seen before. Little protists, parameciums, amoebas, maybe even some bacteria. And that was sort of the beginning of microbiology. And it led to our understanding of how we get sick, how we treat disease. It probably saved a lot of your lives. A lot of you probably wouldn't be here without that. So that's kind of where we're going. Eventually, the work of these two guys, Hooke and Leeuwenhoek, and some other scientists, led to what we call the cell theory. Seems like pretty straightforward stuff, simple stuff. But the cell theory has three main ideas in it. Number one, every organism is made out of cells. Number two, the cell is the basic unit of structure and function. You're built out of cells. Whatever you do happens because cells do it. And number three, you can't get a cell except from another cell. All cells come from other cells. That's the cell theory. We then talked about some characteristics that every cell has. This list. Every cell has a membrane. Is the membrane solid or not so solid? Not so solid. It's kind of liquidy, right? Its main job is to do what? Yeah, it's like a gate, but a gate that lets some things through and other things not. Sometimes we call it selective. All cells have cytoplasm, which is just sort of the jelly-like material that fills up the cell. All cells have little things called ribosomes. What do? They're like the protein-making factors. But they make proteins based on directions coming from where?
Nucleus.
DNA. Not necessarily the nucleus. All cells have DNA, right? Do all cells have a nucleus? No. Okay, so next on the list, DNA. All cells have it. And then the last thing, a little thing called the cytoskeleton. And we compared this to what construction materials? The steel that you find where?
Rebar.
Like in concrete, rebar. It's kind of like that. It's a stretching support. When we get to mitosis, we'll also learn that sometimes those little pieces of protein that make up the cytoskeleton are used to grab on things, maybe like chromosomes, and move them around. The other thing we talked about yesterday was there's too many kinds of cells on Earth today, prokaryotic and eukaryotic. And I told you that the meaning of the word prokaryotic is what? Before the nucleus. The scientists think the first life on Earth was what? Bacteria, which are prokaryotes. They have DNA, but what's the DNA doing in those prokaryotic cells? It's just floating around. It's not enclosed, right? It doesn't have a membrane around it. But prokaryotic cells are bacteria. And there's lots of different kinds of bacteria. There's another category of things called archaea, which are bacteria-like. Those have prokaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cells have a membrane, just like all cells. Prokaryotic cells have a wall. And lots of kinds of cells have a wall. Probably the most famous that you know about is what? Plants. But the job of the wall is to act like support, to hold it up. Most things that have cell walls don't have what? Skeletons, right? So it's support, where to hold their bodies. Prokaryotic cells have cytoplasm. They do have DNA, but not a whole lot. What do we say about the amount of DNA in a bacterial cell? One little short circular chromosome, just kind of floating around. One little bitty circular chromosome that sort of floats around. And remember that they are very, very small compared to regular cells, eukaryotic cells. You can see them with a regular microscope like this, but unless you know what you're doing, it's kind of hard to find them. All right, there's what a normal bacterial cell might look like. One little loopy chromosome in the middle, lots of little ribosomes to make proteins, cell membrane, cell wall, and sometimes they have these little things, which are what? Flagella, which act sort of like, almost like little paddles to help them move. Typical bacterial cell. Other cells are eukaryotic. We said that word means what? What's eukaryotic mean? True nucleus. And what that means is eukaryotic cells have DNA that's what? Enclosed. It's in a container. A membrane is around it. The DNA is like in a vault. But just like all cells, eukaryotic cells have a cell membrane and cytoplasm. Let's say that they have an enclosed nucleus, or sometimes they call it a membrane-bound nucleus. Main thing, it's inside a container made of a membrane. Eukaryotic cells have lots of organelles. Somebody name one. Can you name me an organelle, Tom? Mitochondria, vacuole. Somebody else. Lysosome. Somebody else. Chloroplast. We could keep going. ER, Golgi. There's a bunch of ones you had to label last night. Organelles are parts of a cell that have a very specific what? Function. And they're separated from the rest of the cell. They're in a container too. Each one is separated from the other parts. And we said that's important because that allows each part to specialize, and it allows the cell to split up the work, and it makes the cell much more what? Efficient. Can prokaryotic cells do that? No, because they don't have what? They don't have organelles, so they're not nearly as efficient. They can't do as many kinds of specialized things as a eukaryotic cell can do. In terms of examples, every cell on Earth, except for bacteria-like things, are eukaryotes, right? So your cells are eukaryotic, plants, fungus, even the little protists like the parameciums and amoebas, they're eukaryotic. And in terms of size, we said they are much bigger than your normal bacterial cell, much bigger than your normal prokaryotic cell. All right, where we want to go next is talk a little bit about the cell membrane. This is new stuff. This is where we get new for today. Cell membrane, sometimes it's called the plasma membrane. We're going to use those two phrases interchangeably. Cell membrane, plasma membrane. It's similar in all known organisms. Pretty much all cells have a membrane that's very much the same. Even prokaryotes and eukaryotes have very similar membranes. What does scientists say that means about all life?
It originated from bacteria.
Yeah, it all came from the same place. Everything's related, is what they would say. But like we said before, the function of the cell membrane is to kind of be like a gatekeeper. Control what can go in and what can go out. There's some other functions too. We'll get to those in a minute. But in terms of functions, there's kind of a word that always gets thrown around when we're talking about cell membranes. Selectively permeable. That's an important word to know. Selectively permeable. Any idea what that means? Selectively permeable. Only certain things can get in. Only certain things can get out. It's selective about what it will let in and what it will let out. Cell membranes are selectively permeable. That's important. In terms of the structure of the cell membrane, it's made of lipids. The consistency is kind of like vegetable oil. And we'll look at a picture in a minute, but It's made of these things called phospholipids. And it's made of 2 layers of them, which we'll see in a second.
Do we like talk about those or last?
So,
Do we like talk about those?
we mentioned them. We didn't really go into any detail. We talked about them a little bit. So before we go over any more of this, let's go to a picture and look at what it looks like. Here's sort of what your cell membrane looks like. Each one of these little things here is called a phospholipid. And the kind of the cool thing about phospholipids is part of the phospholipid is polar, which means it's what? What does it mean to be polar? Which means it's what? Why does it attract water? Because the molecule is what? Charged. These little heads are charged. They're attracted to water. Heads up here, heads up here. But these tail parts, they're not polar. They don't like water. So you have part of the molecule that likes water, so it's going to always turn toward the water. And you have another part that doesn't like water, and it always turns away from the water. That's why your membrane has to be like this. It has to be in 2 layers, right? Where the parts that don't like water are always going toward what? Each other. The two sets of tails, which don't like water, are pointing toward each other. And the heads, which do like water, are pointing toward water on the outside of your cell and water on the inside of your cell, because your cells are filled with water, right? That's called the phospholipid bilayer, which means it's just 2 layers of lipids. 2 layers of lipids. Same in pretty much all known organisms. That's the main part of your membrane. What kinds of things could go through that real easily? Go ahead with your question.
How do they figure out this, like, amount of stuff? Like, ain't it pretty hard to get so much stuff?
Well, now they can see the cell. They'd have to do all kinds of chemistry on this to figure this out. Chemical experiments. But anyway, what kinds of things could get through this part of the cell membrane pretty easily?
Blood.
I'm talking more chemicals than blood.
Like maybe.
The things that could get through this pretty easily are things that are small, like little bitty molecules, like maybe water. But also things that are non-polar. Because here's the thing. These little heads are polar, right? They like water. What do we know about polar and non-polar? Try again. They don't like each other, right? But now this picture's probably not drawn to scale, because even though these little heads are polar, the biggest part of the membrane by far is that part in the middle. And what do we say about that part in the middle? It's what? It's non-polar. So if something non-polar comes along, it can most of the time get through without a big deal. If something small comes along, it can get through without a big deal.
Does that include like viruses and stuff?
No, viruses on this scale would actually be kind of big on the scale we're talking. Even though they're tiny, we're talking tiny. Are there big things, relatively big molecules that need to get into your cells? Yeah. Are there polar things that need to get into your cells? Yeah. So there's got to be more to it than just this. And so let's go to a diagram that might show you better what it actually looks like. This is probably more what your cell membrane looks like. A little bit more complicated. You can see that most of it's still those phospholipids. But there's all those little blue things in there. What are all those little blue things?
Things that are getting in and out. Cells?
They're proteins. And what do we know about proteins in your body? They make your body work, right? Whatever you do, it's proteins that make you do it. Proteins make you work. So there's different kinds of proteins here. Let's talk about a few of them real quick. This little protein right here, I'm going to call this protein a channel protein. Why do you think it might be called a channel? It looks like a channel, right? It looks like a pipe almost. What do you think it's for? For big things that can't go through the phospholipid part of the membrane, they can go through it. And also for things that are polar. So it's a protein that acts almost like a tunnel. It lets certain things go through there that can't go through this part or this part. Things like proteins or sugars or ions, things that need to be able to go into the cell that can't get in any other way, can't come in through those channels.
What is something like non-polar that would get it through there?
To get through the channel? So the channels are specific. They only let a specific thing. So you have a different channel for pretty much everything that needs to go through. So probably not. Probably not. All right, another kind of protein you have are these sticking out on the top here. And these things sticking out on the top, notice they've got the blue part, but they also have these little green things sticking out. They're called glycoproteins. What's glyco mean? Sugar. Okay, so it's part sugar, part protein. These things, though, what I'm going to call them for purposes of what we're doing, name tags. Why would your cell need a name tag on it?
Tell other cells like what things.
What part of your body needs to know, hey, this cell belongs to me? Go further. What part of your what part of your body needs to know, hey, this cell is mine. Please don't hurt it. This cell is mine. Your immune system. Here's the thing. Are there cases where your immune system starts going after you? Yeah, there's several diseases called autoimmune diseases where your immune system starts going after your own cells. That's bad, right? You need a way to tell your immune system cells, hey, these cells are mine, please don't destroy them. And that's what these name tags do. When a bacteria, say, gets inside you, let's say you got strep throat, the bacteria cells have different little proteins on their surface than your cells have. So your immune system knows right off the bat, that's not supposed to be here, and therefore it does what? It goes after it. If you were to get a kidney transplant, what's the first thing that's going to happen? The kidney didn't come from you. Your immune system is going to say, hey, that doesn't belong to me. I need to go kill it. So what do they have to put you on if you get an organ transplant? What kind of medicines are the doctors going to put you on if you get an organ? They're going to put you on something to weaken your immune system so that you don't kill that kidney. Because you need that kidney. You don't want to get rid of it, even though your body's going to try to. Not ever completely. The only two people in here who might be able to get a kidney transplant and not have issues with it, I'll get you in just a second, would be these two guys right here. How come? How come they're identical twins, right? Which means what about their DNA? It's exactly the same. Which means what about their name tags on their cells? They're the same. So if we took a kidney from Stoney and put it in Christian, would his body know the difference? No. But if we took a kidney from Hannah's brother and we put it in Hannah, would her body know the difference?
Yes.
Yeah, because their DNA is different. She'd probably say very different, right? And that causes your body to attack. So we're going to call those name tags. Go ahead with your question.
What are kidney stones made?
Really?
Kidney stones are, depends on your diet and genetics, both contribute to it, but essentially things that you eat cause calcium rocks, essentially, to form in your urinary system. And as they're going through your urinary system, they start cutting your parts. So it hurts, it bleeds.
It's painful.
It's not good. Okay? Not good. All right, I want to talk about one more little protein here. And I want to talk about this little thing right here. I'm going to give it a slightly different name than this picture calls it. I'm going to call it a receptor protein. What would your cells need to receive? Why would it have a receptor for something?
Energy.
Maybe, but that's not where we're going here. Ladies, don't pay attention. How do your cells communicate with each other?
Nerves.
All right, partly nerves, but there's another way. How else do different parts of your body communicate, other than just nerves? hormones, right? Hormones are like little signals traveling through your body. How does a hormone get from one part of your body to another part of your body? It's there through the blood. So that means that all these little hormones in your body travel through to all your cells, right? But does every hormone, does it actually affect every cell? No. How does it know which cells it's supposed to affect and which cells it's not? Only certain cells have receptors for certain hormones. And that's what these receptors are there for too. To connect with hormones, and that causes them to receive some message from that hormone. Something kind of weird I'll tell you about. This is going to freak you out. What causes us guys to be guys?
Oh my God.
We're talking about hormones, testosterone, right? Here's something that's going to freak you out. And this is real. Promise I'm not joking on you here. Let's say that many years from now, one of you has a child, and the child comes out, and the doctor says, "Congratulations, you have a beautiful baby girl." And the whole, well, just listen. This is going to take me a minute to get through the story, so listen. The whole childhood, the baby's playing with the dolls and, all the girly things. And the girl gets to 13 or 14 or 15, and her cycle never starts. Cycle never starts. Period never starts. So eventually, okay. Now, everything looks normal, okay? Everything looks normal on the outside. She looks like a little girl. 14, 15, no cycle. That never happens. Eventually, the parents get concerned. They take her to the doctor, the gynecologist. The doctor starts doing his exam. Internal exam, and he gets a strange look on his face really, really fast. Because inside, what's not there? There's no uterus, there's no ovaries. So by that point in time, he takes out his little ultrasound machine and he's checking out her abdominal area, maybe a little lower, and it turns out there's testes inside. Now here's the thing, okay? Here's the thing. Put yourself in this situation. You girls are, you're all not much past this age. Let's say that you've been a girl your whole life. And all of a sudden you go to the doctor one day, and he says, "You're not a girl." So that's essentially what happens. Now, let me finish. I'll tell you what's going on. It's related to what we're doing up here. These people are genetically, they have an X and a Y chromosome, which means they should be what? They should be guys, okay? But they come out looking like girls, but with internal guy parts. This is legit, okay? It's a real thing. No. Let me finish. Everything on the outside looks like a girl who just never hit puberty. Okay? She looks like a 10-year-old girl. Here's the thing. What's going on is that there's a problem. They got a genetic disorder where the proteins, the genes that code for these receptors for testosterone are messed up. Is that person making testosterone? Yeah, you got testes. You're making testosterone. That testosterone is floating around all over the body, and it's sending what signal?
That you're a male.
Make man stuff, okay? All right? But the receptor is messed up. So it's like somebody's calling you and you never pick up the phone, right? The message is out there, but your body never picks up the phone, okay? So in the absence of testosterone, or in the absence of working receptors for testosterone, a human being comes out looking like what? A girl, okay? Now here's the thing. What do they do in that situation? Let's say you're that person. What does the doctor do for you? No, it's a lot harder in that situation. But here's the deal. Here's what they usually do. Go ahead. They usually will go in and do surgery and remove the man part, so that would be weird, right? And then they start giving this person what?
Hey,
Testosterone.
someone else's.
Estrogen, okay? Because did this person have any way to make much estrogen?
No.
Because where does estrogen get made? The ovaries, okay? Doesn't have those, okay? When they put estrogen in her body, what starts to happen? She starts to look like she's at puberty. So the things that happen at puberty to a girl happen. Everything looks normal on the outside. Now, can this person ever have children or anything like that?
Well, yes.
They don't have parts, right? There's no ovaries, there's no uterus. So, but on the outside, everything looks normal, right? And you'd never know this person really wasn't a woman, okay? Yeah.
But if they can get estrogen, can they get like ovaries and like a uterus?
No, those won't grow. They just won't know. They're just not going to have those parts. Yeah.
What about girls who only have their cycle every 6 months?
A lot of that's related to like weight.
That's a big one.
Girls who are really skinny have problems with that. But back to what I'm saying.
My friend's bad.
Tell you a place where this really happened. In this past Summer Olympics, there was a woman like this, okay, in the Summer Olympics. Now, in a lot of the cases with this disease, all of the testosterone receptors are non-working. So would it matter? Would you have an advantage if you were a woman running against other women? If you even though you had testes, if the testosterone receptors don't work at all, would you have any advantage? No, you'd still be like a woman. Okay? But there's also a situation where some of the testosterone receptors work a little bit. And this woman, in this case, that's what she had. She was running in the Olympics. She was running against women. Some of her testosterone receptors were working. She had testosterone. What did she look like?
A man.
I would have loved to be built like this woman. Okay? She had guns, like huge guns. She had like an 8-pack, big old monster legs, and she's running in the 800-meter race, which is 2 laps around the track. Right? What do you think the other women in the Olympics thought? That's not fair.
Steroids.
Exactly, she was on steroids. It said she was making her own steroids, right? And the women, this became a big controversy in the last Summer Olympics because the other women running in that race said, "Whoa, we can't do that. It's not fair." It ended up that the woman fought it and she got to running. And I watched the race because I was interested in this because I knew what was going on. I think she lost on purpose. Because here's what happened. All the races leading up to the Olympics, she'd been blowing everybody out and all the preliminary stuff. But in an Olympic race, it's 2 laps around the track. First lap, it looked like she was jogging. And all the women got like half a lap ahead of her. The second lap hits and she starts running. And you just like boom, 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 boom. She like starts passing them all. And then she passes everybody except for the one woman who's in the lead. And then she's about to catch her, and she just sort of starts jogging again. And it's just like let her win. I think she didn't want the controversy of if a guy who's kind of a girl. Well, no, she's not really a female because she doesn't have external male parts. She's just internal. Oh, she was put together. But that's a real thing. Let me get your question up.
If that was, that story about the baby when she was born or whatever, that's really real. How did you notice that she had when she was, you changed her diaper?
You would everything outside was normal. You would never know. No. The only place things are not right are inside. So you would never find out that this person was really not a girl until they never cycled.
She looks like a girl.
Everything would look girl. It's just a girl who never seemed to start the period kind of thing, or the puberty. Tell you another issue with the same kind of things going on. Related to receptors. You guys know what pygmies are?
What'd you expect to make out?
Pygmies are people who are really, really small. Okay? Now here's the thing. Slow down. We're not talking about midgets. Now that's not a politically correct word, but I'm not politically correct. So I'm not too worried about that. people who we normally call people who we normally call midgets have a genetic disorder, and it's not just height, right? I mean, they're built differently. Right? Their proportions are different. You can tell by looking at their face. There's some obvious things that make a midget be a midget, right? Pygmies are just like a shrunken version of a normal person. Okay? The dimensions are right. The face is made normally. They're just tiny. Okay. Here's the thing. Here's the deal.
These wings are made like smaller than regular.
Sometimes, right? Sometimes that's true. But here's the deal. What they found with these pygmies is that they've got a receptor problem. What tells your body it's time to get taller? A hormone. What hormone? Human growth hormone. Okay? All right. Their receptor for that hormone is messed up. So even though their body is telling them, hey, it's time to get taller, 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 nobody's picking up the phone because the receptor's messed up. And so they remain short their whole life. Go ahead.
What is it when they're like overly tall? It's not normal.
Usually that's they have some kind of tumor in their pituitary gland, which is where growth hormone comes from, and they're just making it too much of it. And they are picking up the phone. And they're just on the phone all the time. Okay? What about what? I mean, some people are just tall. Yeah.
Why did you address it as a disease?
Well, it's not necessarily a disease.
Yeah, I know.
Genetic problem.
Genetic
Genetic problem. Yeah. Let me finish where I'm going with this though. That human growth hormone that we just mentioned. A lot of athletes have been cheating by taking injections of that, right? If I decided that I wanted to take some human growth hormone, am I going to get taller? Somebody my age is not going to get taller because after you get to a certain age, for guys it's around 25 or so, you're not going to get any taller. Your growth plate's hard, you can't get taller. But if you inject human growth hormone after that age, what happens?
You get more stronger.
Yeah, your bones get thicker, your muscles get stronger, and if you're injured, you'll recover faster. You get bigger, stronger. Okay? Barry Bonds is maybe the most famous example of that. Everybody know who Barry Bonds is? Probably the greatest hitter ever in baseball, although he cheated. Okay, he's probably better than Babe Ruth because Babe Ruth is doing it the good way. Barry Bonds is cheating. But here's the thing: Barry Bonds, when he first started playing baseball, was a normal-looking guy. Okay, thin, skinny. He kind of looks like Brandon. Okay. Barry Bonds got on human growth hormone and other assorted things. He's probably on steroids and all kinds of stuff. All of a sudden, he gained a massive amount of weight, a pure muscle, became thick. But the weird thing, if you take human growth hormone and you're past the age you can grow, like I said, your bones get thicker. So over time, his face begins to change. It got weird. Okay, his forehead started sticking out. His chin got thick. His cheekbones started sticking out more. Hormones do weird things to your body sometimes, but they're signals. They tell your body to do certain things. If your receptors for those hormones are not right, you don't receive the signals. And either you can't grow or you can't hit puberty or whatever it may be. Those proteins are really, really, really important. All right, so let's move a little further here. So your cell membrane is made out of two main things. A phospholipid bilayer, that's the main part, with these little proteins, which are the things in blue, embedded inside it. The proteins give it certain functions, whether it's a name tag, or it's like a little channel, or it's to receive messages like hormones. Yeah.
Ain't some bodybuilding girls like that? Like they try to act like a man.
Yeah, there have been cases where a lot of women athletes take testosterone. And, I mean, it works, okay? Those women, they have receptors for testosterone. You ladies have as many receptors for testosterone as us guys do. You just don't have what? You just don't have much testosterone, okay? But what's testosterone? It's male hormones. If you were to inject yourself with testosterone and you're a girl, you can get it, I mean, you can buy it. The doctor can prescribe it. Or there's a black market for it too, the bodybuilders use. But anyway, if you're a woman and you start to take it, the messages that it normally tells a guy, now you're getting. So those messages are make more muscle, make your voice get deeper, start growing body hair, okay? All those kinds of things happen, okay? But if you're a woman athlete, now you've got a huge advantage over the female athletes, right? Now your body is going to be weird and you're going to have all kinds of health and reproductive issues because of it, but you might win a race, okay? That's illegal in sports, by the way, for you to do that if you're a woman. All right, anyway, that's the cell membrane. I want to take a few minutes to talk about a couple of other cell parts, and then we'll head to the lab. Let's talk about the nucleus, real fast. The nucleus is actually sometimes considered an organelle, because it's what? For it to be an organelle, it has to be what? Enclosed, okay? It has to be a separate container. Think of organelles like containers inside a cell. The nucleus is its own little container, and it's a container for what?
The DNA.
The DNA. It's a container for the DNA. The actual container, the membrane that holds the DNA inside, is called the nuclear membrane, or sometimes nuclear envelope. But the key thing, that's where the DNA is at. We talked about chromosomes before. You've heard about chromosomes for years. What did we say in this class a chromosome actually is?
It codes for genes.
It's a long piece of DNA made of many genes tied together, right? It's a long chain of genes. Your chromosomes are inside your nucleus. In your normal cells, how many chromosomes are in the nucleus of every cell?
46.
46. Now, is that true of all eukaryotic cells? No. Every kind of organism has a different amount. Not everything has 46. Some have more, some have less. But humans, one of the things that makes us human is having the 46. Sorry. All right. Anyway, couple more things to know. The membrane around your nucleus, the container, has little pores in it called nuclear pores. Little holes. Why would you want the membrane to have little holes in it?
So you can breathe.
What needs to be able to go in and out
So
of the nucleus? Now remember, let's think about this for a second. The nucleus, the DNA, are the messages for how to make what? Proteins. Where do the proteins get made? What are the parts that make the proteins? The ribosomes. They are not where? They are not in the nucleus. Can your DNA leave the nucleus? No. But those messages somehow have to get from the nucleus out there to the little ribosomes. How do they do that? What's like a go-between between your nucleus and your ribosomes? What's the chemical that's sort of like DNA, but not quite? RNA, right? So your DNA is used to make this more portable thing called RNA. It will leave the nucleus and go out to where? The ribosomes. It's like a portable messenger between those two. Your DNA is really valuable. It's really important. You keep it locked up in the nuclear envelope. It's like a vault. But the RNA is like a disposable copy. It goes out, goes to the ribosomes and says, hey, I need this protein, here's how you make it. That's why the pores are there, that's the main reason. So that the RNA can leave the nucleus and go out to the ribosomes. Another thing that I'll mention, we normally, when we think of a chromosome, think of that, right? An X-shaped thing. What is that really, though? We'll do a lab where we look at some chromosomes underneath the microscope, and we'll see some things that look sort of like that. What are we really looking at when we see that X-shaped chromosome? We're really looking at two copies of the same thing. Because by the time we can see the chromosomes, what's already happened to the DNA? By the time the chromosomes wind up and become visible, what's already happened to the DNA? It's been copied. Because what's the cell about to do when we can see chromosomes?
Split.
It's about to split. Okay, so it has to have two copies of everything. So this is actually two chromosomes. Okay? During mitosis, during cell division, what's going to happen to that X? It's going to split in half, right? And one piece is going to go to one cell, and the other piece is going to go over here to the other cell. It's really two. The point that connects them in the middle, that's called the centromere. The point that connects up the two halves of that chromosome, called the centromere. All right, that's all I'm going to say about the nucleus for right now. Come back to it later. This is sort of what it might look like. It's got a membrane on the outside. You can see the little pores in it, the little holes. It's also got a dark spot in the middle. Really dark spot. And that dark spot is called the nucleolus. The nucleolus, the dark spot. And that's where ribosomes are actually made. So ribosomes are made in the nucleolus, and then they're sent out from there. Let's see, let me do one more thing. All right, let's talk about one more little organelle. We may save the lab until tomorrow. I got a little video I want to show you that'll help you out. Let's talk about this organelle, and then we will go from there. Mitochondria. Mitochondria are a hugely important organelle. They're where what process in your body happens? Okay, say again. Where ATP is made. What's the process that makes ATP though? Cellular respiration. It's the site of aerobic cellular respiration, at least the main parts of it. They're the part of your cell that makes ATP. Sometimes, a lot of times, elementary teachers call them the powerhouse of the cell. Because what we know about ATP.
It's the energy. It's like your gas.
It's like your battery. And to charge your batteries, you do cell respiration. The energy to charge your batteries comes from where? What? Where do you get the energy to make ATP from? Your food. That's why you eat, right? We eat to get energy to make ATP. ATP then will power everything that we do. Talking, walking, thinking, moving, whatever it may be. Let's look at a picture of what a mitochondria might look like. For right now, I know those three things. Powerhouse of the cell. It's where ATP is made, produced. It's where aerobic cellular respiration takes place for the most part. Do all of your cells have mitochondria? Yeah, because all cells have to have what? Energy, ATP. Do all your cells have the same amount of mitochondria inside them? No, some have more than others. What would be a cell in your body that would need lots of mitochondria? Your muscles, because they use a whole lot of what? They use a whole lot of energy. Little sperm cells have a lot of mitochondria because they have to swim all the time, right? Cells that need lots of energy have lots of mitochondria. Cells that don't need a whole lot of energy, maybe like a skin cell, they only have a few. So they all have them, but they don't have the same amount. It's that whole structure determines what argument? Structure in a cell determines function. Structure determines function. Because they have more mitochondria, they have more energy. They can do more stuff. Now, something weird about mitochondria, that's kind of unique, and we'll come back to why it's important later, is that mitochondria have their own little piece of DNA inside them. And it's one little circular chromosome. Sort of like what? Bacteria. Scientists actually think that mitochondria used to be what? Separate things, separate bacteria. And then they became part of a eukaryotic cell later. What's it called when one thing lives in or owns something and they sort of work together? What's the relationship called when one cell or one organism helps another when they work together? I know you guys have heard this before in other classes. You guys heard of symbiotic relationships? So a lot of scientists think that the way we got mitochondria is that it was a symbiotic relationship between two different cells working together. And that's the reason they still have their own little piece of DNA, mitochondrial DNA. Here's what a picture of a mitochondria might look like. Some other things that sort of lead you to believe what I just said might be true. They're about the same size as, guess what? Bacteria. They're also about the same shape as bacteria. We saw a picture of a bacterial cell earlier, right? Sort of look like that. So they have their own, so they're the same, similar sizes, similar shapes. They have DNA that's like the bacteria's DNA. Yeah, it's a good thing, right? What's the symbiotic relationship called that's good for both partners in the relationship? It helps both. It helps, in this case, the bacteria and the other cell. What's that kind of relationship called? Starts with an M. Mutualism, yeah. Mutualism. Be a mutualistic kind of relationship. All right, I want to take a break there. I'm going to put on a little video clip that talks about the cell. And I kind of started talking about this. I hadn't got as far in my analogy. Over here. It's going to talk about the cell, and it's going to compare it to a factory. And it's a good way to think about cells. You might want to write a few things down in this video, because it's going to go through the cell parts. If there's some piece of your homework that you don't have the function for, it'll tell you what the function is in the video. You might want to write it down. It's like 7 minutes or so long. This one is not on Edmodo. It's on YouTube. Mm-hmm.